We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Beck Thompson. And I'm going to read a little bit about her. Just fascinating, actually, for me. I love the work that you're doing. She is a teacher, a speaker, and a champion of traumatized students. I just love that. And you help educators deepen their understanding of the effects of childhood trauma, which I love. And your memoir is called Chasing Normal. And then there's a little paragraph I wanted to read because I really love what you wrote. Is growing up with profound trauma, I felt lost and alone until compassionate, trauma-informed teachers transformed my life. Their empathy and understanding created a safe space where I could not only learn, but also develop a critical sense of worth. These teachers recognized my pain and responded with kindness, profoundly impacting my journey.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Hello. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
So tell us, you're a teacher.
Yes.
And you're going to tell a little bit about your story and then your healing journey. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I guess as far as my my upbringing is concerned, I did grow up. Look, I had a relatively normal kind of 6 years within a family unit, and my parents separated at some time, and my life kind of really changed dramatically, almost overnight. And when they separated, my mum and myself and my siblings moved into my dad's dad's house. It was a bit strange because they thought that she just couldn't handle 4 children as a single mother on her own. So it was decided, even though they were divorcing, that she would move in and they would help look after us all. And so what turned out to be a help was actually a very abusive, controlling, almost cult-like environment. So there ended up being another 9 children in there, and I guess they were sister wives, if you want to call it. Yeah. Well, he was my grandfather was excommunicated from the Mormon Church. Now, of course, I didn't know any of that at 6 years of age.
Right.
I don't really remember a relationship with my grandfather. And so for 3 years, I lived in that house, and there was abuse across the board: sexual, physical, emotional, psychological. And I think one of the hardest things is that I wasn't allowed to have any relationship with my mother. So any attachment I had prior to going in was completely detached, and there was no way to go back. So you would walk past her, and eye contact at best was all I could do. So it was a very difficult home life, where the simplest of mistakes was met with the most pervasive forms of punishment. So you were just beaten and isolated for 8 hours, or you had to stand in the corner and not move for an hour, or go without meals, which were very structured. So you were always hungry because we didn't snack. There was no sugar. So I guess, my only sort of solace was going to school. And that was the only environment where I had a chance to sort of try and relax, to try and be a child, to try and get any support and nurturing from my teachers. But even then it was hard because there were still 9 other kids from the same family watching. So if you did anything wrong, they'd report back, and
Oh.
It was just a horrible environment. You weren't allowed to get dirty, or you'd be beaten for having dirt marks on your school clothes. Um, and so that was 3 years. I was 9.5, I think, when I moved out, and my mum's parents actually got us out of the school. We were sort of escorted by policemen, and
Ooh.
yeah, so I kind of tried to believe that I'd found another safe place with my maternal grandparents. But unfortunately, my mum's father began abusing me as well. So it sort of became this, oh, is this what you do? Is this just what
Yeah.
happens?
Right.
Because at this point, I was, 10, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
been abused since I was 6 by both my grandfathers. And this kind of went on until I was 13 and a half, until it kind of became, when you get to a point, teenage years are already, you're becoming very self-aware of your body and of your
Mm-hmm.
environment and of your peer relationships, and it was really bubbling beneath the surface. And I guess what happened when we moved closer to my mum's father's house when I was 13, I just couldn't handle it anymore. And back then, we didn't call it anxiety. I don't even think I heard the
Yeah.
word, but I knew
Yeah.
my chest was tightening, my nerves were constantly on edge, and I couldn't breathe. Um, and I told someone about it, and they immediately went to the police, which I had no idea about. And and of
So
course,
you didn't know it was illegal what he was doing? You didn't realize that?
I I
Why
think
would you?
well, I knew it was wrong because the
Right.
only thing I had was that it felt wrong. I mean, I
Yeah.
thought this can't be a normal experience. As much as it became the normal, I think
Mm-hmm.
our sort of bodies are a little bit intelligent like that, and we know there's a
Yeah.
knowing. Um, and so it was kind of investigated, and my mother flat out refused to believe me. So it was kind of nearly 14, and I was really on my own from that point. There was absolutely no safety net. The attachment that I tried to kind of regather in those years, leaving the first house, was completely severed. And so, moving forward, that anything she asks of me or wants to talk to me about means nothing. When you say, oh, of course I love my children, you've got that reference immediately. Well, do you? Because I have
Yeah.
no support. You don't care. She completely sided with her father, and I was ostracized from the family at 14, and no one wanted to talk
Oh
to
my
me.
gosh.
No one wanted to have a bar of me, and my mum was complicit. She just, you wouldn't know it though, because she has such a lovely personality, but she would never stand up for us until the day he died. Um, and yeah, so, you know, it was a very, I think, abuse is hard enough. Going
Mm-hmm.
through abuse is hard enough, but
Mm-hmm.
whenever I talk about it, I think it's those years after disclosure, after telling my mum, and really having no one there, that were probably the hardest, because
Mm-hmm.
I had to figure life out on my own. And like you say,
Yes.
this was back in the 90s, early
Mm-hmm.
90s. There was no internet, there was no resources that I was aware of at the time. I was offered foster care, but I still had a few close friends in this little town, and I didn't want to lose that. It was all I
Yeah.
had. It was literally,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to go to some foreign house. My only, grace was that my room now became my sanctuary. My
Yep.
room became my safe place. My
Mm-hmm.
grandfather said he would never come in the house as long as I was there, and I thought, well, that's a win. I get my space back.
Works for me.
Yeah, so that's why I never took foster care, because I still
Yeah.
wanted those important connections that I had. So, but so that room, my bedroom, very much became a safe place that I could completely
Mm-hmm.
control. I could allow what came in and what went out, and but they were the toughest years, I would
Mm-hmm.
absolutely say, without any doubt, definitely.
I mean, there's abandonment, just the fact that she didn't believe you. There's
Mm,
abandonment. And then, like you said, trying to figure everything out on your own. And that's exactly what I had to deal with too.
mm.
And then on top of that, I lived with, well, I should know. I should know how to do that. I should just automatically know how to do that. So I had that on top of it.
Yeah. Well, I what I did, I suppose, and I suppose that's kind of what got me out of started getting me out of the hole I felt I was in was I knew that there were people around me that knew what they were doing. So, like
Mm.
especially my girlfriends at school, they all seem to have the answers. They all seem to have um, the know-how of what to do, and so
Wow.
I took that as my cue that I only need to learn what they know to be able to get by. And of course, it took, well, it's taken me years to get to that point, but I knew that if other people were in a situation or living life as I only dreamed of, that I had at least the opportunity to learn what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
that was my,
At a minimum.
yeah, well, I guess I knew it was possible. So even though
Mm-hmm.
it felt like everything was hopeless and I really just had no idea how I was going to navigate my life, I knew as
Mm.
long as someone else knew the answer that I could find out, because I thought that was the
Ah,
one common factor, is that we're all human, we all have the ability. And I guess I just kind of reduced it to, well, I've just been brought up in this situation. I've This is my situation, but it's not my friend's situation. So I just need to learn the skills and adopt whatever beliefs they have to understand it so I can get myself out of it. Yeah, so that's how I sort of never ever believed I couldn't do anything about it.
that's actually, I mean, it's good. I'm sorry you had to do that, but that's a really good attitude, is
Mm.
being aware of what others are doing and learn from them.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I did, because
Mm-hmm.
there were certainly many times when I sat in that room and I didn't want to be alive anymore, and I contemplated ending my life many, many, many
Mm.
times, because as they say, the struggle is real. You really don't
Yeah.
know what to do. Um,
Yeah.
and particularly when you're all alone, I mean, my friends still didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you really are on your own with absolutely no connection to anyone that can,
Mm-hmm.
support you, it's absolutely frightening. And
Yes.
that road is just so dark. You don't even know the
Yeah.
next step, let alone the next,
Yeah.
5 or 10. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and again, it was back before the internet. So you couldn't just Google, what do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you had to wait for the library to open, and that's what I did. I went and bought a lot of secondhand books, and
Mm.
I bought books on boundaries and respect and how to make friends. And
Wow.
I just went, I got to get myself out of this, and I've got to learn, and then I've got to, I mean, a lot of embarrassing stories, because
Well, yeah.
I would take the I would take the strategies that I would read about, and I would force myself into social situations just to try them out. Um, because I just socially, I had no idea. I had friends, but
Yeah.
I knew once they went away to university and traveling and after school, I had to meet new people. I just knew
Yeah.
if I didn't connect and find people, we're human beings. We're social creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had to get up and do something. I had to, as I used to say to my mother, I had to change the dance, because otherwise
Yeah.
nothing changed, nothing changes. So it was just
Mm-hmm.
bit by bit by bit, and I would take a little risk, you know, but for me it was a massive risk. just
Mm-hmm.
going out
Mm-hmm.
often was huge, and the emotional toll just to take a risk, because all that stuff's going on in your head, isn't it? Like, oh my
Uh,
God, what am I doing? What if no one likes me? What if no one talks to me? What if I say something dumb? What if I do something dumb? All those things are,
yeah.
wearing your cogs
And then
down.
what if you get triggered? What if you get triggered? Then
Well,
it's really all over.
yeah, and again, that wasn't even a word. I don't,
No.
we didn't even use that word
Mm-mm.
back then, and
Mm-mm.
it was, yeah, a lot of, I I do, and I still do it now, but back then I used to talk to my, I guess, as we call it now, the inner child. Um,
Yeah.
I used to say, it's okay, we haven't done this before, but we'll be okay.
Oh.
And I'd always measure it against, the fear is there because, and now I didn't know anything about neuroscience and the nervous system back then.
Yeah.
This was just kind of all in Beck's way, and this is how Beck sorted it out. And I used to tell myself, it's okay that you're scared because, one, you've never done this before, and you're basing it on a fear of something else that's happened. And we can't do that because
Wow.
that's not true. If you've never done it, you don't know. So that
You
was,
are so far ahead of everybody else. Seriously. I mean, it's like you got a little old soul in you that's kind of helping you along, because that's a lot of forward thinking
mm,
and planning. I mean, and self-awareness. That's a
mm.
lot.
Yeah, I look at it now and I think, gosh, I don't know. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, no, and I'm so grateful I did. Gosh, I don't even know where I'd be now.
Yeah.
But that was always, I still don't have a great metaphor, I guess, for that, but it was always just this assuring, even when I wanted to end my life, I would, that pain, that intense pain, that there's nothing that's going to solve this except dying.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I I could still feel that there was this inner child just saying, it's not done
Oh.
yet. We're not done, and Beck, you have not given it a red hot go yet. And that was the thing, like,
Mm.
I'd had 18 years of abuse, abandonment, no, just crap basically. But I had to I had to give myself a go, so then I
Mm-hmm.
could still say, all right, I've given it a go and it's not working. But I had to try, because not trying meant that I was allowing trauma to be the hero in my story. I was allowing that to dictate. And they didn't give a shit where I ended up.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't have cared
Yeah.
less. My grandparents completely disowned me, and my mother might as well have. But who are you to say that I'm not worthy? Because there's 6 billion other people in the world, and someone else might think differently. And it was my aim, and this is one of the other reasons I think that I was able to carry on and heal, is that I looked for people. Teachers obviously were my first,
Mm.
because they were my proof. Other people, if there was someone else out there who could say, Beck, I see you, I care about you, you're
Mm.
valuable, that's all I needed. I only needed one person to dispute what my family thought of me, and that was enough. And that's what they
Wow.
say, you just need one person. But I
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
I used a lot of people over the years. Used isn't the right word, um, but even my first sexual assault counsellor back in the day, she was incredibly important to me, because it was a space
Mm.
that I could tell my story for the first time and be believed. And
Yeah.
that, for me, will always be one of the most defining moments, that someone finally heard me and didn't disregard me and didn't dismiss
Mm-hmm.
me, and felt like, Beck, you didn't deserve that, which was another moment
Yeah.
that I'd never heard from my own mother or
Mm.
my father or any of my family. And, that becomes a pretty strong foundation from which you can go, okay, someone's got me, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes the safety net. I can
Mm-hmm.
fall now because there's someone there to catch me. And that's pretty powerful
Yeah.
when you want to change your life. You need someone in your corner,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm.
So you say that it was teachers that helped you, and
Hmm.
so tell us a little more about that, because is that what is that what fueled what you're doing today? Obviously.
Yeah, I guess the marker for me is when I moved into my paternal grandfather's house, and when you've got that such a closed environment where, all but all but 5 hours of your day is abuse, control, beatings, isolation. Um, when you've got a teacher who, even back then, we certainly didn't know about trauma informed education.
Yeah.
I don't even think mandatory reporting was a thing back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-mm. It
so,
wasn't here.
yeah. But look, I don't even remember my grade 3 teacher, but it was really my grade 4 teacher who he just saw something in me that I don't even know. I know I was, if you look back, I was absolutely a child in survival mode. I was always
Mm.
seen as someone who daydreamed, someone who didn't relate well
Yeah.
to others, very shy, very reserved. Um, they didn't know that, on hot days I'd have to wear a long jumper to cover the beating marks or the
Oh.
bruises. Back then it was okay, just show up and sit down. But there was just something about my grade 4 teacher that he used to smile at me. I mean, we think a smile is so insignificant, but
Mm.
when you do not get 1 ounce of care and that's not shown in any way, and I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
smiled at in that house, not once. There was never a kind word, because ultimately the children were always bad and we could never do anything right. We could only ever aspire to be perfect. There was nothing, there was no little mistakes met with a comfort or a cuddle or it's okay, you're just a child. It
Mm-hmm.
was beatings and banishment and just criticism, and it was just awful. So when you have someone in your outer world smiling, it changes everything. And there must be something in our brains that just sees it, picks it up and go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's safe, that's comforting, that's not fear. And it becomes magnetic, and
Mm-hmm.
you want more of it, because we need it. We need love and connection to thrive,
Yep.
and that predictability. And he saw, and it always blows me away that he saw that I had a bit of a funny side, that I was quite quirky, which I just find so interesting, that even in that environment that I would find any space to try and be funny. And
Yeah.
he picked up on it, and he would get me up and say, come on, Rebecca, say a joke. And just, he was the closest thing I had to a nurturing parent. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 years, and the psychological abuse of forcing her to beat me, even though there was no precedent for her. It was just come in and start beating Rebecca. And so not even having that person say, oh, I'm a mother, I've got 3 children myself. If someone asked me to do that, I'd say, well, you better beat me first, because you won't be getting to my
Mm.
child. Whereas my mother
Yeah.
was, well, you're telling me to do something, I'll just do it. And that's one of those experiences where you never forget that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, having just absolutely no caregiver, you tend to, it sort of magnifies those positive things in teachers. And
Yeah.
so it really, it told me that there was someone out there. And so when I moved schools again at the end of grade 4, I moved to a very tiny school. There was 3 grades with one teacher. And he again was another really positive role model because he was polite, he was welcoming, he was supportive, he was caring. And then of course I went to high school, and I just kind of narrowed in on any teacher that showed any kind of warmth, any kind of care. Um, and that was what got me through. And handing in rough drafts of assignments, I was always looking for some positive feedback that would tell me,
Mm-hmm.
Beck, you're okay. Beck, someone actually cares about you, and you're good at something. Maybe you're good at something today and someone else sees it. And that's a pretty powerful um, thing to hold on to when you've got
Mm-hmm.
nothing else. You're not
Yeah.
going home to a mother who says, Beck, I really believe in you. You're such a great kid. Let's come and do something together. And there's no bonding moments. There's no nurturing moments. That I mean, I have them with my own daughter, and she and I do a lot together, and that's a relationship we build together over little incidental moments, and but it's
Mm-hmm.
consistent. And I just
Yeah.
didn't have that, so I was always looking for that one person that, as I usually say, I'd sidle up to, which is why leaving school was extremely difficult for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I knew that I'd be losing that, and I needed that. So, so I guess now, as a teacher, obviously I went to university for 4 years and I studied teaching, and um, it I realized when I was doing my practical rounds when I was studying how much teachers really meant to me, and how little,
Mm-hmm.
as a child, I really cared about work. I was more looking for that love. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and even more so now, as I teach now, um, I recognise that it is always connection before any curriculum, because that's what's going to be their foundation to do anything,
Mm-hmm.
to relax, to relate, to thrive, to learn. And how and it's just, I guess, because of my background, that I know what it meant to me. And
Yeah.
we're all human. We all need love. We all need love. And I work with some extremely challenging children, a lot of them trauma based. And, it's just the one thing I go to. I don't care about the work right now. Let's talk. Let's play a game. Let's go and do something,
Mm-hmm.
because I know, you know, how much that means they need a reference of safety if they're going to then, chase it like I did. I want them to
Yeah.
know there's hope. I want them to be able to look back and say there was one teacher. And if there's one teacher, maybe there's another teacher, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's someone else like a teacher out in the world. Because that's, even beyond university, I was still looking for people. I was still looking
Mm-hmm.
for mentors. And back then it was at church. I found a lady I used to watch her, and she was this incredibly compassionate woman. And I thought to myself, I could learn a lot from you, because I still, I'd had a lot of counseling, but I still had a lot of trauma behaviors. I was still a
Yeah.
very critical, not a very nice person. And I knew that I wanted to change that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it came from years of distrust of my family, and
Yeah.
not being too scared to open up and relate to people. So I was always sort of on the back foot. Um, and so I approached this lady and I just said, look, I need help. I don't want to be this person. And you look like you've got some really good skill sets. And people at church just seem to gravitate towards her. And I wanted that. I wanted to know how to
Mm-hmm.
relate to people in a way that felt safe for everyone and didn't have people running away from me. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So she was wonderful. She said, yes, I will, but there'll be some conditions. You're not allowed to slam doors. You're not allowed to give me the silent treatment. So she really took me in, and I still slam doors, and I
Mm-hmm.
still as a site, but she pulled me up and she just said, well, um, if you want to learn, you've got to learn how to deal with your anger. You've got to learn how to deal with boundaries from other people. You've got to learn how to deal with conflict. And I think I was 21 or 22 maybe at this point.
Mm,
So, I just
still a baby.
well, yeah, yeah. Now I think that, but I felt I was getting so old then that I thought I'd better start
Yeah.
learning how to behave, because I just didn't want it following me, and I was already
Hmm.
learning a lot through counselling that I thought, well, this is another step for me. So yeah, but I think having those teachers was really my first exposure. And I just always believed that if there was a one, there was someone else. And if there was someone else, there was someone else in front of them. So I just kept chasing the relationships I wanted to be a part of or learn from. So yeah.
I wish I took that route. I mean, there's just so much forward thinking there, and there's so much self awareness at such a young age. I mean, thank God, because that's
Yeah.
really what helped you on your healing journey. And, I think about all the years that because I had abandonment issues and I didn't feel loved. Actually, I was actually told I wasn't loved and believed it. And so I was on a journey for many years looking for people to love me,
Mm.
and that desperate, desperate feeling, even though in the back of my mind I thought, well, they might love me and then they're going to find out who I am and then they're not going to love me anymore and they're going to leave
Yeah.
me just like
Okay.
everybody else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But and I do remember, like I was sharing with you before we started recording, that I started my healing journey at 19, and I remember even before that being aware of that I was abused, and also aware of that it can be passed on. And I
Mm.
was contemplating, not having children, because the last thing I wanted to do was pass this stuff along.
Yeah.
And at 19, just feeling that desperate, like, I know there's something in me, something is wrong. I just don't know what it was. I didn't realize it was pain and the trauma and everything. And there wasn't anything out there. I'm much older than you. But there really wasn't anything there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the therapy that I took later really wasn't trauma therapy. It was not. It was talk therapy. It was not trauma therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's what it was back in the day. Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't know. They didn't know. And like I said, it's only like over the last like 15, maybe 20 years that they've learned so much about trauma, and they're realizing you can't help someone heal just sitting there talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense because in some of the research I was doing, I don't remember exactly where I heard this. It was something I was listening to or something, but they talked about, you know, when people, uh, like when there's a crime or something and somebody witnesses it and they have memories of it, as years go on, those memories fade.
Mm.
But when it's PTSD, you're actually reliving the memory. So you're actually reliving it. So I could sit here and tell you details, 20, 30, 40 years later, because you're actually reliving it as opposed to just remembering it or trying to remember it.
Yeah. I think that's in. I read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel
I
Van.
think that's where I heard it, because I'm listening to that right now. I think
Yeah.
yeah, I'm listening to like two books
Yeah.
and reading one and watching podcasts and, doing all this research. So I think it was in that I
Yeah,
heard
well,
that.
I remember the experiment he did with the couple who were in the car accident, and the wife, I think, when they did an MRI or they were scanning the activations in her brain, they said the same areas that activated during the accident activated when she just thought about it or when she was talking about
Yes.
something. Yeah, so it just sets off the
Yeah.
same responses. It's so fascinating, and yeah, we were never talk therapy. Well, obviously was the only available, you know, back
Right.
then. That was it. There was nothing about the body, and
No.
how we experience trauma in the body. I'm sure it's funny when you think about it. I certainly have a lot of memory of sitting there in a lot of sessions and knowing how my body was. And I'm sure they would have noticed things, but
Yeah.
they just weren't trained to
They didn't know what to do.
what to do with it. Yeah. So we've come a long way, which is amazing.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
I mean, it's and I say it on a lot of my podcasts because I really want our listeners to get this, that you really can heal from this. It is a lifelong journey,
Mm.
right? Because you learn to manage it. Some of it you heal from, and some you learn how to manage. Um, but there's hope. You don't have to live in that
Yeah, I mean,
yuck that you were living in before.
yeah, I think there's always a layer that gets exposed eventually. I think there's many layers, and um,
Yeah.
but for me, and look, I still have things that come up, but the one difference
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't have 25 years ago was that I'm more resourceful now. I have a lot more inner resources, because I know
Mm-hmm.
I've faced a lot of hard things, and I go, well, that's like that time. So what did I do then? And how can I apply it now? And oh, that's just a new thing that's come up, and so you've got a lot more. Well, for me, there's a lot more inner resources that I can use. And I also have
Mm-hmm.
more of a foundation of connection and safety in my relationships, that I know that if I need it, I can go outside and get that support,
Mm-hmm.
which will help me again. And I think, for a lot of trauma survivors, especially starting out, and if it is a trauma, one of the traumas of abandonment, it's very hard to risk it all when you've got nothing to try
Yep.
something different, because there's no foundation. There's just no
Right.
foundation of someone's felt sense of safety. I don't think we can do a lot without a felt sense of safety. Um,
Oh yeah.
mm,
Yeah. Because as you were sharing the story, and I admire it that you had the forethought to realize, first of all, watching your friends and, oh, I can learn from them. And then
mm,
looking at teachers that you could connect with, and, that you felt safe and that you wanted to have those relationships. Because when I think about me, and I wish I had that in me, but adults were so not safe. I didn't have any safe adults in my life. So, well,
mm,
neither did you really. I mean, but it was for me, the route I took is keep my mouth shut and not talk about it. But I reacted out. I acted out all the time,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I didn't realize how deep that went in me about not talking about it. And
Mm,
I know the belief system was it's me. It's me. I'm the problem,
mm,
right? So I just
yeah,
need to keep my mouth shut. I'm the problem.
yeah,
And so, and I can, and so that was my mindset. And so to reach out to an adult, no way.
yeah,
To tell them what's going on, no way. Because they're just going to turn around and just confirm in my mind what I already know. It's me. I'm the
yeah,
problem.
yeah, yeah, the common one.
It's just interesting how we have abuse that happens in our life, and how, I mean, I didn't have the sexual abuse. But how we react to it, and
Yeah,
how we respond and think, and I think that it's so resourceful in you to even forward think that, like, you realize I need to connect with people so that I can heal, so that I can have that in my life.
yeah,
I need to make the attempt. I expected them to come to me,
yeah,
and it wasn't an ego thing. It wasn't an ego
exactly.
thing. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just sitting here, you come to me. It
No,
was, if they come to me, then they like me.
yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, I was way too shy, really. When I say I sidled up, I really was. I was going to school that even their presence was safe for me,
Yeah.
especially if they were a nurturing teacher. Then I felt safe as soon as I walked in the room, and I just so craved someone to care about me that I was looking for that connection, and I would
Yeah.
use it in all the subtle ways. Like I said, no one knew my story. No one knew what my home life
Mm.
was like. But I was so convinced that I had to find someone. And it probably just felt survival. It was a survival thing for me. I had to
Yeah.
know someone cared. And so I just looked for it in as much as I could, and I took from it what I needed to sort of hold on to and refuel and get through another
Mm-hmm.
day, and know that, that's the thing that got me to school. And I don't honestly, if I'd not had that, I don't know where I'd be. But I just
Yeah.
had to use the one thing I knew that just got me out of bed and got someone to see me, someone to care about me, so I could go home and isolate in my room again and go back to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is like the third or fourth episode that I've done where I've dealt with teachers or some people that work with children. And it's interesting that, and once I heard it like the second time, and then you said it about how you felt safe at school.
Mm.
And I stopped and I thought about it. I thought, you know what? I did too for years. I mean, I know I could go to school and get lost in all of it, and I wasn't going to get hit, and I wasn't going to get yelled at, and I wasn't going to get all that. It's really interesting. But I didn't have the teachers or the counselors that I connected with, though.
Yeah.
That was difficult. That was really
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
I felt very alone. I just didn't even think to say anything.
Yeah. I don't know. I was probably just so desperate.
Well, and too, I guess I could have thought, what is somebody going to do? Like, what are they going to do? Because back in that day, there wasn't anything protecting children when it
Yeah.
came to abuse. That wasn't there.
Oh, I mean, I had an escape plan from the first, my paternal grandfather's house, and I write about that in the book, because I was so desperate to get out of there. And I remember
Yeah.
actually rolling out the plan one day after school to escape and ring my grandma, who lived in Melbourne. So far away. She didn't even have a license, so I don't know in my young mind how it was even going to work. But I remember getting to the phone box, and I was merely, a couple of steps away from it, and my point of freedom, my point of I can escape this, and I couldn't do it, because I knew
Mm.
if we were late home, all of us kids, we'd all get beaten for it. It was not like, oh, it's Beck's fault, she can cop the punishment. Everyone copped the punishment. And I
Mm-hmm.
just thought, if this doesn't work, I'm in serious trouble, because they'll watch me all the time. I probably won't
Mm-hmm.
even get my own bed. I'll probably be on 24-hour watch, because they had, even
Mm-hmm.
in the 80s, this house had monitors. It had, speaker monitors, so they could hear what you were
Wow.
doing and they could speak to you. It was very high tech for the 80s. Um,
Yeah.
so I realized, and funnily enough, being so young, I realized the consequences of what would happen if this plan didn't work. And my grandmother would ring my grandfather. Obviously, they were divorced, but and I just thought my life will probably just be much worse than it is now. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but yeah, definitely. God, absolutely hated being in that environment. I mean, kids know, you know.
They don't understand, but they know something's off. They know that this isn't, it's not normal. We just don't know how not normal it is.
That's it. And I think that sort of, emotional barometer, am I meant to feel this lousy all the time?
Yeah.
And maybe because I had a relatively normal life before I moved in, that was my reference point. And I thought, well,
Oh.
I don't feel this happy anymore. Every day, it was chores. You went to school, you came home, you did work, and if you didn't do the work, you were
Mm-hmm.
beaten. If you didn't do it to a standard, you were beaten. So I was always, are we meant to be? And because it was God based, everything was God's listening to your thoughts, God's looking at your work, God's looking at the way you dress.
Yeah.
Um, there was a part that, well, why does this God hate me? What have I done? What can I possibly do to be accepted? And that was always driven into us, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I think your saving grace is that you did have 6 normal years
I
before you
think,
went into the
yeah,
chaos. So
yeah,
you did have a point of reference,
mm,
some point of reference.
yeah,
Whereas my abuse was as far back as I can remember. Like
yeah,
it was, so
yeah,
that was my foundation. But at least, and that probably is what really helped to motivate you,
mm,
besides being a very resourceful person. But I mean,
mm,
that's probably like you have something, you have a barometer to
Yeah.
compare
It's
it
a
to, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and all I had in my life, I mean, I would go to my friend's house and I would watch like how brother and sister would interact, and it wasn't anything like at my house, and so I knew it wasn't normal, um, but I didn't know how off it was at the time. I
Mm,
just knew I'm just like, wow, I don't play with my brother like that. Like we don't have conversations like that. Like her brother isn't beating her up. Like what's up
yeah.
with that?
Oh,
Because I'm thinking this was. I honestly, when I think back on it, when I was really little, I was thinking that's just normal. That's just brother sister thing.
yeah.
I didn't have anything else to. And this is interesting because I never got along with my brother as far back as I can remember. And it's interesting
Mm,
because we've got some old video, or not video, but film, because it
yeah.
was old, right? Of me. And I remember seeing it, and I'm like 4 years old. And I've got my little bikini on, and I'm playing with my brother. I got the hose, and I'm chasing him around the yard, and I'm, trying to get him wet. And I remember the first time I saw that thinking, wow, we played together.
Yeah.
I,
You don't
I
remember.
don't remember ever doing that.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that may have been your saving grace. So let's talk about your adult life now. So you went to school, you became a teacher, and now you have a mission, right, to help parents and to help students so
Mm,
that they don't have to deal with this stuff, and provide a safe place for them, right?
yeah. That's my
So
mission.
tell us about that.
Well, I guess I kind of starts. I didn't teach very long full time. I sort of came out of university and I met my husband that the same year I finished university, I think. It's a long time ago
Um,
now. um, and I taught for a couple of years full time and then, we started a family and I suppose at the time we're a bit traditional and I said, well, I want to raise my children. So I left teaching and became a stay-at-home mum, which, was the most important job in the world to me. And because,
yep.
when you become a mum, everything's sort of, you can remember how you were treated as a child and
Yep.
all the mistakes and all the, you know, absences and disconnection and it's not meant to be a blame thing. It's like, wow,
Right.
I'm responsible for this little human and
Mm-hmm.
what I do will affect this child. And it was so important to me. And I didn't realize how important. And I remember talking to my husband at the time, I think I was 6 weeks pregnant. I said, what sort of parents are we going to be? And he looked at me and he said, why are we worrying about that now? And I said, because it matters now. How are we going to do this? Because we both have a trauma background and I don't want to continue this rubbish. That's not my child's legacy
Mm-hmm.
and I won't allow it to be my child's legacy. Um, and so, um, I stayed at home for a good part of 10 years. I had 3 children and, I sort of became very mentally unwell. I guess at the time it was triggered by one of my oldest friends' mother who got very sick, and um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess and coming through that, because I was so mentally unwell, I had chronic anxiety. I was having panic attacks multiple times a day,
Mm-hmm.
and my kids were so young. I think my daughter, my youngest, was 1. In fact, I was extremely unwell when I was pregnant with her, and I think after I had my daughter, I fell apart, and that was it. And so coming through that, and sort of really, uh, I guess, re-healing the mental illness that I had for 6, 7 years at its worst. When I went back to teaching, it really no longer became about the curriculum. I realized that as much as I could do it, and I will do it, and I still do it, um, it became more about, gosh, like I put my kids through some stuff with my own mental illness. That's something that they saw, and how much. I mean, that hurts me thinking about that. But
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, there's kids out there that just don't get that support, and it just became more
Mm-hmm.
important to me. And so, and I look, I've always had that need to nurture and protect my students, even from the start. But about 3 years ago, I got a phone call from the school that I work at, and I'm only a relief, or I think you call it a substitute teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a relief
Yeah.
teacher now these days, and I got a call from the special ed department. She said, "Beck, would you work in special ed today?" And I went, "Are you desperate? Am I the only one you can call?" And she said, "Well, yes, actually you are." And I went, "Okay, I'll give it a try." Um, and I think it's 4 years now, and I have never left special education. And but these days, the kids that I'm with are your trauma kids. So they're the
Yeah.
ones that need special interventions. They need,
Mm-hmm.
they can't stay in mainstream a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we have classrooms where they can come in and, use the sensory stuff, or just have a conversation, or just, whatever. Um, and so it's sort of changed more so the way I look at all of our children, across the board, but more so these kids that present, that just struggle, they really struggle. They can't sit down and learn. They can't do the traditional come in,
Yeah.
sit down and learn. And it's not an easy job, but I always take it back to, what did I need? I don't
Yeah.
even know their story, but I know, I can see they're struggling, and
Mm-hmm.
it's my duty to make sure that I help them through that struggle and give them what they need, not what they need to know. It's not about content. In this moment, it's about connection. Can this child trust me? And I've
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of, extraordinary sort of transformative experiences with these kids over the years. And I, like I said, I don't get into a lot of mainstream anymore. I'm still there because the school's, still got the mainstream classrooms and whatnot, but it's just so important. And, as you know, the research coming through with trauma and healing, they need connection. They absolutely
Yes.
need safety. And
Mm-hmm.
there's, the Bessel van der Kolks and the Bruce Perrys, they're all talking about this fundamental need to connect, to be able
Mm-hmm.
to thrive, to be able to relate, to be able to, engage in society. And it starts with us. And if I can have
Mm-hmm.
an input and an impact in that, so that, like I said earlier, it gives them a chance to go, there was someone in my corner. And, I always think, well, I want them to know that. And maybe,
Yeah.
like me, they'll know that's enough proof for them to go and get help, or for them to rely on another
Yes.
beautiful human that can help them through for a portion of time. And
Mm-hmm.
so I find that's the work, because unfortunately there's so much trauma in our world. And
Yeah. It's not going away anytime soon.
in, and maybe it's because I kind of work in it, but it just seems to be just,
Escalating.
it's so
Mm-hmm.
prevalent in our
There's
society.
just so many more ways now to be traumatized as a child that there was when we were kids, right?
Yeah.
You've got the school shootings, you got, there's so many more things too that cause trauma in their life than what we even had.
And I mean, I think this, the way that we deal with it now, it's not suck it up
Yeah.
and keep going. Oh, come on, you're a child,
Yes.
just keep going. We just know so much now about the nervous system and the brain, and how those experiences actually leave imprints on our nervous system, and actually affect the next experience that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that, and I find that really, really hard to ignore,
Mm-hmm.
especially when, sometimes I'll be in the school, and I'll be asked by a teacher, just get them to do some work, and I just go, no, they need connection first. They need a
Mm-hmm.
safe place first, because we know they're not getting up here. They can't get to the
Right.
cortex if they're in fear. So,
Yeah.
and it's not always easy, because we're getting the message out there slowly.
Slowly.
And I know there's
Yeah.
an amazing lady in America, Dr. Laurie D. Sortel. She does some incredible work in schools in America. She's come out to Australia a couple of times.
What's her name? Dr. Laura.
Laurie,
Oh,
Lori.
Lori.
Yeah, I'm probably not saying her last name right. D. Sortel, Desautel.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna look her up.
I was fortunate. I met her at a conference a couple of years ago in Australia. And I follow her because she just does some incredible work in the schools, particularly in America, about teaching children about the nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's phenomenal, her knowledge in what she does. So
I mean, that should be in schools. We should teach children how to regulate their emotions and how we're expecting them to come out of the birth canal and know how to do this stuff. And that's our job to teach them,
yeah, well, I mean, that's
you
it.
know?
You can't, and I mean, you know, I guess we're sort of gone past the days where we say, well, what about the parent? But if the parent doesn't have the skill,
Right.
you can't teach a skill you don't know. And
Correct.
so yeah, in an ideal world, it'd be great if parents could teach that. But but what does that mean though? What I see happening is that when we teach our children, they'll probably teach the parents, and
That's true.
you'll see this revolution coming through. I
Yes.
actually had an experience of that, gosh, years ago when I was teaching in a mainstream school class, and I had the prep class, and I started teaching them. I called it heart space breathing, because every time they came into
Mm.
class, they were just like a bunch of wild animals. I am not doing anything until these kids are,
Yeah.
calmer state. So we used to do heart space breathing, and I taught them how to do it. And every day, and if I missed a day, they'd say, "Oh, come on, Miss Beck, we haven't done our heart space breathing," because I used to talk about how good it felt to breathe, how good that feels in our system.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I got a little, at the end of the year for Christmas, the mother actually got me a gift, and she wrote me a letter, and she said, my daughter's struggling with anxiety, and I didn't know how to help her. But she mentioned that Miss Beck was teaching me about heart space breathing. And she just said, I can't thank you enough for teaching my daughter,
Oh,
because she sleeps so much better now. And anytime she feels like she's anxious, she does her heart space breathing. And I went,
how
wow,
wonderful.
isn't that lovely? So they
Oh
can
my God.
teach. These kids can
You
teach.
know, it's interesting because I had a guest on the other day, Scotty Amos, and he, um, here in the United States, he's in Pennsylvania, and there is a trauma school there. I
Mm,
think he said they have 5 of them. It's called Lakeside Schools, I think. But it's interesting because one of the things that, and it's so true, and I say this all the time, that kids act out for a reason, right? They act out for a reason. They don't
yeah.
just wake up one morning and decide to be a bad kid, right? There's a reason why they're acting out.
Mm,
And he was saying, I mean, I got so excited when I heard about the school, and I'm going to look and see if we have more here in the United States, but it is specifically for kids in trauma.
yeah.
And like they have a regulatory room. So when one of the kids is wound up, they can go in this room and they have things that help them learn and teach them
Yeah.
how to regulate themselves and get themselves calmed down. Because he actually adopted 2 children from Russia, and they were 2 and 3 years old when he adopted them, and they didn't know that they came from severe trauma.
Yeah.
And for years they struggled with the kids, trying to discipline them the traditional way, and it backfired on them.
Mm,
And it was them almost getting the kids taken away that got his attention. He's like, okay, we're doing this wrong.
yeah.
And discovered that the kids had trauma, and so changed everything they did about raising these children. And
Mm,
they're now doing really well. So
yeah.
I would love to see if there's more trauma schools here. I did look here in San Diego, and there is, with the San Diego Unified School District, they do have a trauma police officers, but it seems like, I haven't done a ton of research on it yet, but it seems like they're there for when the kids get traumatized at school, like
Yeah.
if there's a threatened shooting or something like that. Not what we're talking about, which would
Mm,
be nice to be able to have these kids to have a safe place where they can go and talk. Because I and I didn't even talk. I didn't even share my story.
Mm.
It's interesting. I kept my mouth shut for, I mean, even until my early teens or my late
Yeah.
teens.
Yeah. Wow.
And and so just imagine if I would have opened my mouth and said something, what help I possibly could get.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely resonate with that though, because it's so hard to say it. I do
Yeah,
think that because then you feel the exposure immediately. I don't know. I found that I know when I
you're very
started
vulnerable.
counseling, yeah, it's what's going to happen now. I don't know.
Yeah,
I felt that. I
yeah.
remember when I started counseling when I was 19, I think, and just saying it, there's, where's it going to land? How's it going to land? Is there anyone going to be there to catch me? It was such,
Hmm.
I can definitely relate to why kids never say anything because without a foundation in safety, why would you, you know?
Yeah, and it's
Why
like,
would you?
well, I don't want to rock the boat at school, right? Because that's
Mm,
my safe place that I can go to. So I don't want to rock the boat there and
mm.
get things stirred up there. And I know that if I would have opened my mouth, I
Yeah.
would have gotten in trouble. I would have definitely gotten in trouble. So I think that was the other fear I had.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely didn't want to get in trouble at school because I didn't. Yeah, for me, it was
You,
I needed all the love I could get, and I wasn't going to
exactly.
challenge that, risk
Yeah,
having that being taken away. So, no, I was
exactly.
always the very
Exactly.
compliant child. I was quite happy to do that.
Yeah, you become a people pleaser because that's the safe avenue to take, right?
Yeah, yeah. If you
Because the
give
other
up
avenue can
everything
be
of
painful.
yourself, then you know you'll be more
Yeah.
likable, and you need that. Yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely, I mean, we've come a long way with the trauma, but I think we're just scratching the surface, really. I think there's so much more for us to learn, and it's really encouraging.
yeah,
I would love to see more in schools to help these kids, and even children who aren't traumatized, they all need to learn how to regulate themselves. They all
yeah.
need to learn how to regulate their emotions.
Mm,
Because, I mean, if we think about it, babies are born, they scream. When they're hungry, they scream. When they, that's how they communicate. And we teach them as they get older, okay, it's okay when they're 2 months old. It's not okay when they're 20. Right? And so in between there, we have to teach them
yeah,
that, when you're upset, you don't just scream, but we don't sit there and teach them how. Like,
yeah.
you know, and I say this all the time. I'm going to say it again. My daughter-in-law is so good with her kids that when they get upset, she's really good about sitting down with them, talking them through them, helping them understand, what is it exactly you're upset about, and then help them work through that so that they calm down. Because think about it, if a kid is acting up and then you're yelling at the kid and you're punishing the kid, imagine yourself as an adult. If you're upset, if you're sitting here upset crying, is it going to help you if I start screaming at you?
Mm, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know we teach them how to be. I mean, gosh, I wish I could rewind a lot of my parenting moments when
Me
I
too.
didn't even understand any of that, and
Yeah, me too.
and I can only imagine, um, you know, even what I know now, like I said, I had mental illness for a few years while my children were very, very young. And I know that they'll have some memory of that for sure. Um, but I can't even imagine how challenging it is for other parents that, are still in their illness and live that out
Yeah,
every day, trying to raise children.
yeah.
And but if I knew now, what
Yeah.
I knew, I'd go back in a
You
heartbeat.
knew then what you know now? Yes.
Yeah, but I also believe in repair, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
I because it's not a write off. We think, oh well, we just did our best, and it doesn't matter now. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does matter now actually, and I can go
Hmm.
back and I can repair the moments now. Um,
Yes.
I mean, my eldest is 18, my youngest is 13, and there's still moments now where. I think it even happened the other day. I said I've got two sons, and I said, I need to have a chat with you two. And my eldest just kind of looked at me and he looked a bit afraid. And I said, are you scared? And he goes, well, have I done something wrong? And I went, no,
Oh,
I need to have just a conversation with you two. It's nothing bad, but need to share something with you. And he went, oh, okay. And I just went, did I do that? Did I ever have a,
yeah.
and he goes, oh, sometimes, you would just,
Ah,
and so he's already remembering, oh, there was a moment where mum would probably go off. And so
yep,
that's a repair moment for me. It's okay.
yep,
And, there's nothing wrong. And if I need to say that for the next 20 times for his body to learn that it's okay when mum says we need to have a chat, that it's safe, that's the repair, and I think we can
yes,
always repair, and teach, because that's what we're doing now. We're teaching our nervous system what's safe and what's not. And
right.
so that's why I think, if you stuff up for years in your parenting, or there's moments where you could have done better, the body does repair. The body does relearn
Mm-hmm.
what's safe. So
Mm-hmm.
I think repairing in parenting never stops, as long as you're willing to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I didn't handle that I never used to handle that well. I was a very overwhelmed mum, and was
Yeah,
trying to get
yeah,
everything done. But I think that they're so important, those moments, just to get that body back
yeah.
to safety and balance.
No, I agree. And repairing, because for your kids, that's a teaching moment too, right?
Absolutely.
That's a teaching moment for them, and it's an opportunity for you to, like you said, reach out. And go, am I making you feel like that? And
Mm.
helping you become aware. And then, you know, I'm sorry, because like I had a conversation with my son a few years ago because I realized, although I didn't directly abuse him because I was really careful about that, he was raised with a mother who was in survival mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a marriage that was not healthy for
Mm.
either one of us, and he heard a lot of that. So
Yeah.
there is trauma there.
Yeah.
He lived in a home of strife, and I realized that. I didn't realize at the time because I was literally in survival mode.
Mm.
Literally, in so many ways, in every way that I could, I was
Yeah.
in full on survival mode. And sometimes I was carrying 2 or 3 jobs, trying to work, and
Yeah.
and I was in a marriage, and and I just, it's those moments, and that's what has really connected my son and I, because from the moment he was born, I told him I would never lie to him,
Mm.
and that we could talk about anything.
Yeah.
And and I remind him that he just turned 34. I remind him of that. Honey, you
Wow.
can say anything to me. It's really powerful. But is you can go back and you can repair some of the stuff that you've done. So and the reason why I'm saying that is because for years I beat myself up over that,
Mm.
being in survival mode and doing the stuff that I did when I was in survival mode, and just being absolutely horrified by some of my behavior. But I have gone back where I could, and I've made amends,
Well,
to
we
for
only,
both them and me.
yeah, I mean, there's that sort of balance, I think, because you've got to sort of give yourself compassion for the fact that you were doing,
Yes.
we all doing what we know to do in the moment.
Right.
And we're all doing the best we can do with the resources we have in the moment. And sometimes we just don't see the other resources as available, and we don't know how to
Right.
access them. And we don't know those regulation tools to be able to access them. That
Right.
pausing. I remember learning
Mm-hmm.
to pause before I
Mm-hmm.
reacted was a massive thing for
Yes.
me to do. you know
Huge.
yeah, even something as simple as pausing, because you think you've got to fill that very next moment, that you can't leave a
Right.
moment undone. So you
Mm-mm.
react, you got to fill the
Mm-hmm.
space. And the day I learnt that, oh, I can pause, and I don't have to, the space can be left even for a moment, and it's okay.
Yeah.
That was such a big thing for me to learn.
It took a lot of pressure off, didn't it?
Well, I think because when you've been traumatized, you're always carrying yourself, and like
Yeah.
say you're in this limited survival mode, and you've got to fill the void that's not filled is often just as scary. And
Correct.
I remember that when I had chronic anxiety, I thought I had to fill every single moment, every single space had to be filled with a thought, a feeling, a fear of something. And learning that I could sit in that space and not react and not have a
Yeah.
fear and not have a thought it was just huge. And that really, once you learn that, that just opens up it really does change the way that you start to relate in the world, and you can feel yourself expanding. You're not sort of trying to hold yourself in.
True.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
For me, that pause, especially when I'm triggered, that pause
Yeah.
and not reacting.
Not
because and I've experienced over the last several years big triggers where I've walked through from the beginning to the end, and just almost like I was observing it, not like I was necessarily experiencing it, but I was observing it. And that pause between when you're triggered and your response is critical, because that lack of pause is the messes that I had to clean up later.
Yeah.
Because my reaction was over the top.
Yeah, I know that, and that's what I hated. I really.
Oh, I know.
I realized, why didn't I just stop and think about that? Why didn't I stop? Why didn't I sleep on that? Why did I feel like I had to do something in that moment? And
see, I didn't even think like that. I mean, that is so brilliant. I was so unaware that I was triggered. The only thing I would notice is I knew sometimes it was over the top how I was reacting to the situation, and I was seeing how the other person was responding to me, and I knew it was off, but I couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
It felt like it had control over me until that's a trigger. Oh, wait, when I'm feeling that, I need to pause.
Yeah.
And as soon as I realized you're right. It is so empowering that you now control it instead of it control, because that's what it felt like. It had complete control over me. It would take me over.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like, when you get a text message that sort of throws you and you think, oh God, I mean, 10 years ago, I would have looked at that and gone, oh my God, I'm going to respond now and I'm going to tell you.
Yes.
And, but then if you leave it, you think, oh, they might not like me if I don't respond. And now I'm in this space where I go, oh, I'm going to have to think about how I respond to that one. I'll put it away for a few hours when I'm calmer. Yep. I mean, even I find myself saying it now. I'm too angry to respond to that right now. So I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to talk to someone else about it and just see how I feel.
Yeah. Because you know what I learned about that? I totally get that, because what I would do is I would get a text or whatever that would upset me, and I would respond and make a mess of it. And then when you finally talk it out with the person, the text that they sent me was nothing like how I interpreted it. Yeah. And chances are at the moment it was where my head was at and how I read it because of where I was at. Had I paused and gave it a minute, I probably would have eventually been able to see it for what it really was.
Yeah.
That's the messes I was cleaning up.
Yeah, I know. I just became, there was actually something recently where I sent an email to, I think my son's orthodontist, because I just got there was a situation going on and I completely freaked out. And I sent this email and I wasn't too rude, but I was very firm. And then I even slept on it, which probably makes it even worse. And then the orthodontist rang me first thing Monday morning, and I was just like, oh God, what have I done? And she was so nice. And I just felt myself just falling from that little pedestal. And I just went, oh, I'm so sorry. I really took that the wrong way. And I kept sort of reviewing the email thinking, God, I wasn't that rude. And she said, no, you weren't rude, but I could tell that it had upset you. And I just went, oh, I'm so sorry. I knew I shouldn't have sent that bloody email. But I'd left it for a day, and I thought, no, I've got to deal with it, because I was, and if I think about it now, it was the anxiety of leaving it,
Yes.
and so you fall into the old habits. You still fall into them,
Yeah.
but hopefully I'm going to remember that next time. Go, well, leave it 2 days, just don't respond at all. Just,
Well, at least you're laughing about it.
because I just, because it's one of those things where you go, I thought I'd learnt my lesson. I thought that
I know.
I thought I knew better. And you tell your kids, well, just sit on it, just wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works itself out. Oh, but I want it. No, just wait. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take it from mom. Trust me. I know best. I know. I've done that too, where I've sent an email and then after I'm calmed down, I read it, I'm like, oh, God, I could have really reframed that a little bit.
Yeah.
I could have said that a little different. I don't do the emails that I used to do a long time ago.
No,
I used to joke that I could shred people with my tongue, and I don't do that anymore
Yeah.
at all. But it's kind of like that feeling of like, once you're calmed down, it's like, and then you read it, you're like, oh, God,
You just can't see it
God.
when you're that
No.
when you're that upset. There's something that just blocks off your rational thinking.
It totally does.
And that's,
and you put filters on that you see things way different than you do when you're calm and rational.
Yeah, and that's why, I remember when when I was living at home and I was, really had no idea and I was struggling, and I used to ring a psych line, because that's the only thing I had. Fortunately, I had a phone line in my room, and I used to ring a phone line, the psychiatric line, at 2 a.m. Because I just couldn't sleep and I was very wound up. And I still remember them saying, just have some warm milk or just do some breathing. Even back then, can you have a nice cup of tea? And I remember screaming down the line going, what the hell is that going to do? And, that's because I didn't know, and we weren't taught that when you feel that way, there are things that will help. But I was looking for the proverbial wand that went,
yes,
better.
Yeah.
And of course, now 30 years on, I know that I needed to learn how to get myself back to, a regulated space where I could manage it and go to sleep. But back then it was like, that is not a solution. Tea is not a solution. A walk or, just sleep on it, that's not a solution. But now we know better. We need that movement, the warm tea, those sorts of things that actually, there's science of that's how our brain regulates. Right?
Yeah, it really does work.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I'm so grateful for, that information is getting out into the public now, because we think about the lives we could have saved knowing that information. You know what I mean?
I know.
That it's very hard to hold on to that pain, and that's ultimately what we're trying to get rid of. But to learn, even in small steps, that there's things we can do to keep going, to feel better, and to learn to use those resources. So, and again, that's why it's so important that we teach those things in school. So even when we're not with those kids that need our help and want our presence, that they can do those things in their own time, in their own environment outside of school. And then they can take that skill into their lives, hopefully,
Yeah, and learn how to self-soothe and self-regulate and manage themselves. I mean, that's so empowering, because when I think back to when I would lose it, that is such a helpless, hopeless, lonely feeling. It is, I can just remember, I'm triggered and I'm going off about it, and everybody's looking at me like I'm nuts, and I'm looking at myself like I'm nuts, and I'm all over the place, and all I want to do is take it all back, take it all back, take it all back, and pretend like I never said that. And you can't undo that.
No.
And that is, it's a terrifying place to be.
Yeah. But I think that's, it's I mean, I kind of laugh about the way I used to be, but I like talking about it, because I think there's the hope in that, we can recover, we can learn. And I mean, I've got gosh, I could probably write another book with embarrassing stories of things that I did. But I
Yes.
don't care, because I just think, well, that's the human experience. And from where I came
Yeah.
from and what I had and what I didn't have, it's perfectly explainable why I was the way I was. And that's why, even people that do some of the most horrific things, my first thought is generally, what's happened to that person
Yeah.
to get to that point,
Yes.
because I don't
Yeah.
believe that we're born monsters. I just don't believe that. uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, I use my own experience to believe that, but I just don't. I always think there's something
Hmm.
that's happened where they've felt there's just no other way. And
Right.
I think that's what we need to sort of address. These people that just
Hmm.
don't have the resources, and they don't have
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
connection and safety to be able to learn to use the resources. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Well, this has been very interesting. And, if our listeners wanted to reach out to you, if they had any questions, or maybe some parents maybe need a little advice, how could they reach you?
Well, I'm on the usual platforms, I guess. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Um, I do a lot on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, a lot on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you're a lot on LinkedIn.
That's probably my main platform, really, where I talk about. I mean, most of that stuff is based on my own experiences that I just use to
Right.
reach out to educators. Um, yeah, I've gone blank. No, I mean, I have a website.
Well, we'll have them down. We'll have them written out for everybody so they can just
Yeah,
click
I
on
mean,
it.
my
But I know,
website.
because
Yeah,
I found you on LinkedIn. I actually found you
yeah,
on LinkedIn. So
yeah.
yeah.
That's generally where I'm found. I do have my website, which is beckthompson.com.au, and people can read about me there or reach out to me there as well. So,
Yeah, you post some really great things on
mm,
LinkedIn, really things that are helpful. Actually, I got one printed out. It's the one where you have the chart and it talks about the different behaviors of the children. It's
oh
it's
well,
over there. I can't
yeah.
look over there and get it, but yeah, you posted it like a week ago or something. And I'm like, oh, that's
Oh,
really good. I printed it out, and I think it's just the different behaviors or stuff to look for. I don't remember now off the top of my head, but it was really good. And I thought, oh man, I'm gonna have that in my little toolbox
it's
too.
there's so much
You
out there.
know,
There's so much, and
Eh,
yeah, I mean, I love it, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning all the
oh
time.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh
and
yeah,
I love, I'm big fan of Bruce Perry, Laurie D. Sawtelle, who I mentioned, and Bessel. So, they use their research and their findings to sort
yeah,
of do a lot of my posts as well. So I'd like to
yeah,
mix it up with my own lived experience and what the
yeah,
research is telling us. It's pretty clear these
yeah.
days, which is fabulous. Mm.
I mean, that's the way people can connect with you, is us sharing our stories and kind of the
Mm.
crazy stuff that's happened to us, and that's how people can connect, because so often people, especially who haven't begun their healing journey, for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why this happens, but it's really common that they just don't talk, they don't share, they don't, they
Mm.
live in this suffering for years before they finally open up and reach out for help. So
Mm.
I love the work you're doing for the children.
Yeah.
There's several people I've had on here actually that really help with children. It'd be great to save these kids from years of
Yeah.
suffering, right? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It would be nice to.
so
Mm.
one last question for you. What do you want to leave our listeners with?
Oh. Oh, I actually had the first thing that came to mind is that what we do matters, I guess. I mean, even I guess
Yeah,
I was thinking from an educational point of view, but, what we do matters. And, the thing is, we don't know what people are going through. Even, people,
yeah,
people tend to say, be kind, which of course I agree with. But yeah, what we do matters. And we just,
yeah,
you know, when I think about what my complete journey that I've been on for 30, 40 years or something now, and I always remember the people that were kind and made me feel worthy, not having a
yeah,
clue what that meant to me in any given day, in any given moment. And yeah, so what we do does matter. and it can mean a whole lot to someone that you have no idea.
Well, like you said earlier, a smile made changed your world, right? Just having someone smile at you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll
Oh,
never forget that. Yeah.
well, thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for helping these children and
Mm.
helping them create a much better future that, they wouldn't have without your help. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. I love it. Oh, save these children from years of suffering. I love it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the time, Lisa. It's been such a good conversation.
It really has. I knew it would be. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.